is found. I'm living the questions, finding the answers in your grace. I'm living the questions, discovering all that you have made.
Welcome to Living the Questions podcast. This is a podcast where we create space to discuss how faith intersects with culturally relevant topics. Today our topic is going to be media and faith and how social media impacts our lives. My name's Trevor Rankin, and I'm here with my two co-hosts.
Rachel Metaboon.
And I'm Jesiah Showers.
And today we're going to be in studio talking with Dr. Karen McKinney, who is a professor of biblical studies at Bethel University here, and her areas of interest include youth ministries and biblical theology, with a special interest in experiential education, anti-racism, and diversity. So thank you for being with us today, Dr. McKinney.
Very happy to be with you.
So to start us out, do you want to go ahead and shoot with how her personal experience with social media has been?
Yeah, so Dr. McKinney, our first question for you is, are you on social media? And if so, how do you use it? And if not, what are your reasons for not using social media?
Okay, I will start with my generation. I'm older, and so it's a change, and so I have resisted that change. I finally got on Facebook a few years back, so I am on Facebook, and I noticed that all young people are into social media. So I use it, I'm aware of it, but I have avoided being on Twitter because of the time. I don't even like email.
Okay.
Because it takes almost an hour a day to get through it.
I know, right? We were trying to guess, what do you think Dr. McKinney is on social media? I was like, I bet she's on Twitter. I bet she's got some good thoughts that sharing on Twitter. But, so Facebook. So how's your experience with Facebook been?
It's okay. It just, when I get on, it just ends up taking so much time.
Yeah. Have you found that
I'm on LinkedIn, too.
Okay. Have you found that it takes space away from, time you can use with God, or has it been helpful in maybe forming some connections with other people that have maybe led you closer to God, or?
Nah. Well, my church has a Facebook page.
Okay.
And so when I preach, they put stuff on Facebook, and they can stream sermons. And so what's good is that people who are present or people who aren't present, if they liked it, they go back and stream it and see it again. There's pictures from, I preach experientially, so there's things that I do, and sometimes they put those things on Facebook, and then people can watch them, and people have contacted me and wanted to talk more. So in that sense, that's a good thing. But otherwise, my actual use of Facebook or Messenger, because I get Messenger, or LinkedIn, it hasn't impacted my faith in that sense.
Okay.
If that makes sense.
That does make sense. Mm-hmm. So in your work with, I'm just curious as to sort of what kind of work you've done with youth, and are you still working with youth?
Well, it depends on what you consider youth. So I started when I was in college working with Hospitality House, which is a Christian Boys and Girls Club. And so it was my part-time job. And then when I graduated, I became full-time, and I worked from being the single girls club worker to becoming the director of Hospitality House Girls Club. And I had 6 full-time staff under me and 38 volunteers that I was coordinating. And we moved from about 60, 80 girls all the way up to 600. And so that, the 14 years that I was there, I did that work, and then I left and went to seminary, came back, and was a chaplain for kids in chemical dependency recovery. And I was the chaplain at Fairview Riverside Hospital, and then I was a part-time chaplain for kids in jail with Hennepin County Juvenile Detention Center. Then I did a 3-year stint as a youth pastor at a church in North Minneapolis. And then through all of that, we've kind of weaved in working at a camp. So I would get a month off from a lot of my different places of work to be the director of a camp that was on service learning. And so in the summers, the camp brought together kids from all over the United States and did a 12 to 14-day camp. So lots of experience before I started teaching at Bethel. And when I came to Bethel, it was to teach youth ministry. So I'd done it for 20-some years, and now I'm teaching it. and myself, it's like, okay, my students are as young as 17 and as old as 22, and that's still youth.
How do you think social media and media in general has impacted your work with youth ministry?
Oh, I think social media has impacted young people's lives.
Yeah.
And so in that sense, I need to keep up with some of this stuff. So that's my thing. I never wanted to teach. We have a class on youth culture. I never wanted to teach that because youth culture changes so much.
Yeah.
And so just trying to keep up. And I volunteer at my church now with youth. So I've taken youth on the mission trips and on the trips to visit colleges. And so they're constantly on their phone. They're in front of screens. I know that elementary kids spend about 6.5 hours a day in front of screens, and high school kids 11 hours a day. That is totally. And so it's like I have to infuse some of this into my teaching. So I let students use their phones to look up stuff. And, I was in class this week, and I'm like, okay, read this article either on your computer or on your phone, and then talk about it. So I think I don't know if that's social media, but that's using the media. And so it's But so I see young people using a lot of different platforms. Some of the platforms I think are good, and some of them I think are really negative. They make online bullying. It wasn't even invented before you got social media. So now that becomes a very real issue. Access to things that they should not necessarily have access to as young people, that's a huge issue. So there's a lot of things that have kind of come out of the woodwork with social media.
As we mentioned at the beginning of the podcast, you work with anti-racism and diversity. Obviously, like race representation has increased through our society a lot over the years. So we were wondering if social media has helped or hurt the fight against racism.
I would say it's done both. Because we have social media now, like white supremacy groups had been on the decrease, but now with the onset of social media, they're on the increase, and they have more than doubled, and I think they've even tripled the number in the United States of white supremacy groups. And all of that is because anybody can get on there and say and do anything they want. But social media is why we have Black Lives Matter. Had they not had that, we wouldn't have had that whole group and that whole movement. And so that movement has propelled anti-racism work right into the headlines all over the place. So it has both helped and hindered.
So would you say that a lot of times it can challenge people's beliefs on race, or can it solidify groups of different races?
It depends. It does both. So if you only go to sites and places that confirm what you already believe, then it's going to solidify what you believe. And if you limit yourself to only looking at that kind of stuff. But if it can challenge you, if you go look at new stuff. I was just at a lunch with a woman who didn't know some things, and she was a business person. And so I said, look at these sites, and these were sites that were designed to educate. And so she said, okay, I'm going to start with this documentary, and she's going to look at it on YouTube. And I said, yeah, go. And she was just, her husband called me and said she was just blown away by that documentary. And she's like, I thought I was so far, and I didn't know any of this stuff. And so I think that it can be a great educational force, and I use YouTube stuff all the time in my classes and with people, and when I do anti-racism trainings with nonprofit organizations. So we tap into that, and I guess that's a social media platform.
I was wondering if since social media has just come on so huge so quickly in the last 10 years or so, I was wondering if you have any tips or maybe guidelines that we can use to avoid just selecting, following only the people we agree with on Twitter, or only selecting to see the information that we already agree with. instead of sort of maybe broadening out?
Yeah, I guess if you would have to self-monitor and be self-reflective. So that's the first tip is how much do I reflect on what I think, and then I'm like, okay, who might think something different? If I'm reading this and they might what I'm reading or hearing, they might be saying something against somebody, then it's like, well, instead of taking their word, what if I go listen to what that against somebody is and listen for myself? If this is the views, so to just say, okay, I'm recognizing that I spend a lot of time on this particular site. What sites, and it's not real hard to find, what sites are saying something different? So maybe I should go and spend some time on those sites just to see what they're saying so that I can either agree and say, yeah, this is not good, or I can say, wait a second, maybe this is something worth listening to, or worth seeing, or worth hearing. So that would be a tip, is to be self-aware. And then always to be a critical thinker. So when you see or hear something, always ask yourself questions. Who benefits from what this is saying, or what I'm reading, what I'm seeing? Who's present and who's absent? Every time you watch something, they're creating a picture of the world. Well, what kind of picture are they creating? Is it a world that has only able-bodied people, or are the disabled present? So if they're not, then what are they saying? And if I see that over and over and over, what is getting solidified in my mind? If I never, the regular media, the old media, if I never see Native American people, it seems like they have no stories and they're invisible. And I'm like, wait a second, that tells them they're not important, but it also tells me they're not important. And so to challenge the story of what I'm being told.
Yeah.
That's really to like challenge the narrative that we're getting fed.
Yeah.
And to be a little bit more critical about that.
Always. And to say, okay, what is this? Who benefits from the discourse being like this? Yeah. So just create a series of questions, critical questions to ask yourself, and then respond as you get the answers.
Okay.
So overall, kind of as we've gone through this discussion, and as social media has sort of just been around us as we live our lives, just overall, how do you think that social media has more of a negative or a positive impact on people?
Oh gosh, that's a tough one.
Yeah.
See, I don't want to say negative because I think it's here to stay.
Yeah.
I don't think it's going away. And so I think we have to figure out how to make the impact more and more positive all the time, because it's not going. And so if the impact is negative, then where does that lead us? And I don't think that the whole of the impact is negative. I think there's positive there. And I think the challenge is to increase the positivity.
Yeah.
And to figure out, okay, if this is how it is negative, how can we get rid of some of that?
Just jumping back to a topic before we close, I was wondering, as you were talking about your work with youth, if you've seen like behaviors change in youth because of social media. Because like I know when I'm going into a class, maybe for a first time or just before a class, everyone's always on their phone, and so it's like, well, at some point that wasn't the case because we didn't have those.
Right.
So I was just wondering.
That's like that behavior of constantly being on the screen and being almost controlled by your phone. So that's behavior that I have seen that I don't see that as a positive. It's like, okay, we're in class now. Let's do class. Let's put that away. And the inability of some students to put that away, to excuse themselves and just go out into the hall. And I'm like, what? Your phone vibrated, and so now you have to run out to respond to it. And it's like, no, you need to be present. It's like, you paid all this money to come to school. So be in school. So that's a behavior that I have seen change. But I have also seen political activism in students that I had not seen before.
Oh, that's interesting.
And a lot of that is due to social media, to them tapping into finding out about issues and then being linked and networked. And it's like, I just got a thing that we're going to march on this and we're going to go do this. And students do it. And I had not seen that before. So that's behavior that I see and that I like. Even if I don't like what they're doing or where they're going, but it's like just that activism has been inspired through social media. Other behavior.
Today we have been discussing how media and faith relate to one another. We are thankful that Dr. Karen McKinney has been able to join us in the studio today. Thank you to all those listeners who have joined the conversation today. Thank you to Alyssa, Tay, and Philip for helping us produce this podcast. The Living the Questions podcast is an educational extension of Bethel's Youth Theology Institute for high school students. For more information, check out Living the Questions at www.bethel.edu/living-the-questions.
I bend, I might fall, but I'll never break, 'cause my God will hold me always. I might bend, I might fall, but I won't back down, because in you my love is found. I'm living the questions, finding the answers in your grace. I'm living the questions, discovering all that you have